Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined. They're real. When the white Ford Transit van re-entered Northport, Florida, in the early hours of September 1st, 2021, no one knew it was the beginning of a federal case that would dominate national headlines. The van's driver didn't notify anyone. There were no updates on social media, no check-in with the Petito family, just silence. Inside the Laundry household, things appeared calm. Brian Laundry had returned home to his parents' house on Wabasso Avenue. Neighbors reported seeing him mowing the lawn and riding his bike with his nephews in the driveway that week. But the one person who was supposed to be with him, Gabby Petito, was missing. Gabby's parents, living in New York, had grown anxious in recent days. Text messages from their daughter had slowed, then stopped altogether. The last confirmed video call with her mother occurred on August 24th. After that, only vague, oddly phrased texts, and then nothing. At first they hoped she'd simply lost cell service. Maybe the remote campsites in Wyoming made communication spotty. But Gabby was methodical. She documented everything, from hikes to meals. Her online presence wasn't just for show, it was part of her life. And when that stopped, the family noticed. On September 11th, 2021, Gabby Petito was officially reported missing. By that point, Brian Laundry had already been home for 10 days. The Northport Police Department responded immediately, but there was a problem. Gabby wasn't from Florida. The van was registered under her name, yet she wasn't in the state. There was no crime scene, no body, and no cooperation from the one person who knew her last whereabouts, Brian himself. When officers attempted to speak with Brian on September 11th, his parents declined on his behalf. A lawyer had already been retained. This wasn't a typical missing persons case. It had the signs of a potential domestic incident, possibly interstate. That made it federal. The FBI was brought in within 48 hours. Special Agent Kristen Riley from the Denver field office, who had worked wilderness abductions before, was assigned to the case due to the suspected location, Wyoming's Grand Teton National Park. Meanwhile, Northport PD coordinated the van's seizure for forensic processing. The digital data collection would become the case's backbone. The van was towed to an off-site facility on September 14th. Inside, forensic analysts discovered several key elements: a stained mattress cover, an empty hard case that had been cut open, multiple personal items belonging to Gabby, her ID, a notebook, and a phone charger. Yet notably, no phone initial luminol testing yielded a positive fluorescence response on the inner wheel well and passenger floorboard. Swabs were sent for DNA comparison, but this wasn't enough. The physical evidence raised flags, but without a body it meant little in court. The digital trail, however, was less forgiving. The FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey Team, CAST, retrieved Gabby's last known ping, August 27th, in the area of Spread Creek Dispersed Camping, Wyoming. After that, her phone went dark. Her bank account remained untouched. Her social media went silent. A volunteer-based search began in the Bridger Teton National Forest, over 70 square miles of rugged terrain. It wasn't random. The CAST data was precise. A half-mile grid around the ping location was drawn, and trained canine units from Teton County began combing the high brush and ravines. On September 19th, 2021, just before noon, a search volunteer discovered a body partially buried near a dry creek bed. It matched Gabby's description. Her remains were confirmed by forensic odontology that evening. At this point in the investigation, media coverage exploded. The hashtag #NoshFindGabby was replaced with #Arshan Justice for Gabby. But here's what made the case more than just a tragedy. It was what wasn't being said. Brian Laundry had already disappeared. On September 17th, 2 days before Gabby's body was found, his parents told police that Brian had left home to go hiking in the Carlton Reserve, 25,000 acres of swamp and brush. No phone, no wallet, just a backpack. The timing wasn't lost on investigators. Search teams deployed drones, swamp buggies, cadaver dogs. No trace of Brian. For now, no arrest warrant had been issued. He was only a person of interest. But with Gabby confirmed dead, that status wouldn't last. On paper, Gabby Petito, and Brian Laundry seemed like the type of couple made for the digital age. Both in their early 20s, both into outdoor living and minimalist travel, both eager to document every step of their journey across America. Their Instagram feeds were curated, aesthetically consistent, and often captioned with vague optimism. "Nothing is better than this," or "The journey is everything." To the casual viewer, they embodied freedom. But when investigators began combing through their digital history, a different narrative started to surface. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit requested full access to Gabby's and Brian's social media logs, private messages, email backups, and GPS metadata. The goal wasn't just to find her last location, it was to construct a psychological profile of both individuals in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Gabby's family provided the FBI with her iCloud credentials. That allowed agents to retrieve deleted texts, cloud-stored images not posted publicly, and location tags embedded in raw media files. One of the earliest observations, the volume of messages Gabby sent to her mother sharply decreased between August 23 and 27. This wasn't due to poor signal. Metadata confirmed she had service on August 25th. The content of her last iMessages also showed uncharacteristically curt replies, some with grammatical errors or word choices her mother described as "just not Gabby." A digital forensics analyst flagged this anomaly. A photo taken by Gabby on August 24th had embedded geotags from Ogden, Utah. The next post, uploaded August 25th, had its metadata stripped. It was manually altered, something typically done to mask location. This wasn't the behavior of someone traveling freely and joyfully. It was control. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed the August 12th incident in Moab, Utah, where local police were called to a report of a domestic disturbance between the couple. Body cam footage had already gone public, but federal investigators wanted the unedited original alongside the full dispatch audio. In the report, a witness stated he saw Brian slapping Gabby and chasing her up and down the sidewalk near the Moonflower Co-op. That same witness later contacted authorities again after Gabby's disappearance, emphasizing that his original wording had been downplayed in the official summary. A second witness, previously undocumented, came forward via tip line, providing a cell phone video, partially obscured, of Gabby crying and attempting to re-enter the van while Brian blocked her physically. The FBI interviewed the responding Moab officers. Their decision not to arrest either party was based on the belief that Gabby was the primary aggressor, as stated in the call transcript. But Gabby had visible injuries, scratches on her cheek and arms. She admitted to slapping Brian first, but also mentioned he had grabbed her face. The report failed to classify the encounter as mutual domestic violence, and no charges were filed. The FBI didn't comment on the local decision, but they noted it. Quietly, it would become relevant in how system-wide protocols on domestic violence intervention were later reevaluated. Back in Florida, agents performed a full forensic audit of Brian's phone and laptop, after securing a federal warrant and gaining access through device backups uploaded to Apple's cloud. The data suggested multiple deleted messages and searches related to hiking trails in remote Florida regions after September weren't. There were also cache searches about criminal penalties in missing persons cases and how long someone had to be gone before being considered a fugitive. Agents flagged this not because it proved guilt, but because it showed a significant shift in behavior. Gabby's device, by contrast, went silent after August 27. No further logins, no backups, no movement. The absence of data became its own kind of evidence. Friends and family interviewed described the relationship as intense. Gabby was the more expressive one, often seen deferring to Brian in group settings. He was described as controlling, prone to irritation when plans changed or things didn't go his way. One friend recalled a night in 2020 when Gabby stayed over unexpectedly after an argument. She had called Brian 6 times that night, worried he would shut off her phone line, which was under his name. The psychological autopsy painted a clear picture. Gabby, while outgoing and warm, exhibited signs of emotional dependency, often apologizing for things she didn't do, or minimizing confrontation to preserve peace. None of this proved what happened in Wyoming, but it set a baseline. As one FBI profiler noted in internal memos, patterns don't kill, but they forecast vulnerability. Gabby and Brian had originally planned to complete their cross-country trip by Halloween 2021. They left New York on July 2nd in a converted white 2012 Ford Transit van. Their itinerary was open, with highlights including national parks, scenic trails, and online content creation. Gabby handled the filming, editing, and social media, while Brian drove and managed the gear. Their posts continued through August, Colorado Springs, Moab, and Salt Lake City. But after August 24th, Gabby disappeared from camera. All subsequent images posted to her account were solo shots of Brian, landscape photos, or posts without clear dates. The absence was noticeable. In forensic sequencing, gaps often reveal more than data. Why was Gabby absent from her own feed? Why did Brian stop posting altogether after returning home? The digital evidence told its own story, one without narration, but heavy with implication. August 12, 2021, Moab, Utah. Just after 4:30 p.m., a 911 call came into Grand County Dispatch. A witness reported seeing a gentleman slapping a girl outside the Moonflower Co-op. The vehicle, a white Ford Transit with Florida plates, was heading north out of town. Officers from Moab City Police were dispatched. They located the van near Arches National Park around 4:45 p.m. Body camera footage began recording at the initial stop. Gabby Petito, visibly distressed, was found in the passenger seat. Brian Laundrie stood outside the vehicle, calm, arms crossed. Both complied. Gabby was crying, breathing rapidly, and had red marks on her arms. Brian had a scratch on his face. The footage, now public record, has been viewed millions of times. But the unedited version, reviewed by federal agents weeks later, includes key interactions omitted in most summaries. At one point, Gabby says she hit him first, but also states she was grabbed by the face. She admits she has OCD and is trying to keep everything clean, downplaying the escalating tension between them. Brian jokes with the officer. He appears relaxed. The officers decide to separate the two for the night. Brian is taken to a hotel. Gabby sleeps in the van. No charges are filed. The incident is logged as a mental health break, not domestic violence. But that assessment didn't align with protocol. FBI specialists in domestic violence response reviewed the footage on September 21st, 9 days after Gabby was reported missing. Their internal report, later cited in DOJ training reform in 2022, noted critical failures. Gabby's physical injuries were not photographed or documented in detail. The primary eyewitness's full statement, that the man hit the girl, was not given weight during the evaluation. Gabby's visible emotional instability was interpreted as the source of conflict, despite her reporting being grabbed. The term used in the report, confirmation bias. Investigators also obtained dispatch call logs. The initial caller described slapping and aggression from the male. The phrase was used 3 times, yet the final report from Moab PD framed the altercation as mutual and minor. No one thought to cross-reference the officer's field notes with the full 911 transcript at the time. Later analysis showed another issue. Neither officer had received updated training on intimate partner violence identification in over 2 years. In reconstructing the sequence of the Moab stop, FBI investigators requested Brian's and Gabby's cell tower pings, GPS logs from the van's onboard tracker, and traffic surveillance footage. The result, a 12-hour window that told a more complex story than either individual had admitted. From 7:58 a.m. to 3:17 p.m., the van moved between various rest stops and a trailhead near the Colorado River. Satellite imagery confirmed no other vehicles parked in the area during that period. No physical altercation was observed on camera, but thermal drone footage, archived from a local environmental project, captured a heat signature suggesting 2 individuals walking apart in opposite directions from the van at 1:22 p.m. No argument, no shouting, just space. Gabby returned to the vehicle 27 minutes later, alone. This detail wasn't critical on its own, but it was added to the case file for context. Something was shifting between them long before they entered Moab. After Gabby's death was confirmed, the Moab incident became a focal point in public discourse. But within the investigation, it held forensic value too. Forensic pathologists at Teton County Medical Examiner's Office revisited injuries documented in Gabby's autopsy. Among them, bruising patterns inconsistent with a single traumatic event. At least one contusion, below her left jawline, was older than the others, estimated to have occurred 1 to 2 weeks before death. That dated it roughly around the Moab incident. Gabby hadn't reported that bruise. It wasn't photographed. It hadn't even been noticed. The internal review by the Utah Department of Public Safety, completed in January 2022, confirmed that Moab PD had mishandled the traffic stop. 2 officers were placed on probation. New training standards were introduced across several Utah counties. But from a federal standpoint, the moment was already gone. The missed opportunity to intervene didn't cause the crime, but it denied Gabby the formal protection that might have changed the outcome. As one FBI analyst put it in her field notes, if the line between disorder and danger was ever visible, it was blurred in Moab. The data from this incident fed into a broader profile being constructed by the Behavioral Analysis Unit. Combined with Gabby's text messages, search history, and journal notes retrieved from the van, a timeline was assembled of emotional instability, intermittent conflict, and signs of psychological duress. There was no single event, no explosion of violence, just steady, incremental control. It was enough for agents to mark the August 12th stop not as an isolated event, but as a threshold moment. The point when external intervention might have interrupted the internal pressure building between 2 people who were isolated, mobile, and unsupervised. What was recorded in Moab wasn't a conclusion. It was a warning, one that had already gone unanswered. Between August 24th and August 30th, 2021, Gabby Petito's digital presence, once consistent and predictable, dropped into a pattern that immediately raised red flags with federal investigators. This wasn't simply a missing person case anymore. It was a silent interval filled with abnormal metadata, language discrepancies, and activity gaps that didn't match her routine. The last confirmed video call between Gabby and her mother occurred on August 24th, while she was reportedly in Salt Lake City, Utah. Her voice and manner were normal. She mentioned limited cell service and feeling a little tired. No alarm bells at the time, but 2 days later, that changed. On August 27th, Gabby's family received a text message from her phone. It read, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." Stan was Gabby's grandfather, but she never referred to him by first name, not once in any prior message. Her mother immediately sensed something was wrong. That message was forwarded to the FBI's digital evidence team. The phrasing, timestamp, and message headers were extracted. Forensic linguists flagged it. It lacked Gabby's usual syntax. She typically used full punctuation and informal tone. This one was rigid, oddly structured. A review of her iCloud backups confirmed she hadn't used that phrasing before. At the same time, all outbound social media activity stopped. No Instagram posts, no video uploads. Gabby had maintained a near-daily pattern of documenting the trip. Investigators reviewed her saved drafts folder. There were no pending posts, no partially written captions, just a blank interval. Agents expanded their scope. They pulled access logs from Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Most platforms showed device access from the same IP address between August 24 and 26. But on August 27, a login attempt came from a mobile IP pinging outside the normal range, just north of Jackson, Wyoming. That region matched Gabby's last known location. Then it stopped. No further logins from her account after August 27th. Not from her device, not from any location. FBI CAST, Cellular Analysis Survey Team, coordinated with Verizon to retrieve tower data for Gabby's number. Her last confirmed tower contact was near Spread Creek around 6:12 p.m. on the 27th. From that moment on, the phone never reconnected. No roaming, no power cycles. It simply disappeared from the network. Investigators also reviewed financial activity. Gabby's debit card saw no use after the 27th. Prior to that, she had withdrawn $23 at an ATM in Ogden, Utah on August 24th and purchased gas on the 25th. Nothing afterward. No food, no lodging, no contactless payments. Meanwhile, Brian Laundrie's online activity, when examined in hindsight, showed a complete void from August 29th to September 3rd. No posts, no messages, no searches, only one data point. A withdrawal of $1,000 from Gabby's bank account on August 30th at an ATM in Wyoming. The withdrawal was done using her card. These overlapping digital voids were not coincidental. Investigators knew that in missing person cases involving intimate partners, Control over communication is often the first signal of escalation. Gabby's silence wasn't a fluke. It was active, measurable, and timed. Search logs also revealed that on August 29th, a woman matching Gabby's description was reported by a travel blogger driving through the Spread Creek area. Dash cam footage captured a white van, parked oddly, rear doors open. No movement outside. The timestamp, 6:17 p.m., August 27th. The FBI matched the footage to Gabby's vehicle. Same damage, same stickers. The video provided a static but definitive location. Gabby's van was still at Spread Creek the evening of her last message. When her body was found in that same area 3 weeks later, the timeline became irreversible. Digital evidence told a clear sequence. Gabby's communication changed abruptly on August 27th. Her phone and accounts went dark the same evening. Activity from her devices stopped while her financial access was used once, days later. But what the evidence didn't show, what it couldn't show, was intention, not yet. It only confirmed opportunity and access. As one agent noted in the internal case file, the data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. The van pulled into Northport, Florida on September 1st, 2021, sometime between 10:30 a.m. and noon. It was the same 2012 white Ford Transit that Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie had documented across national parks for weeks. The same van that had last been seen near Spread Creek, Wyoming, parked off a dirt road, its back doors slightly ajar. Gabby wasn't in it. There was no call to her parents. No post to say she decided to stay behind. Just a silent return. Surveillance footage from neighbors' home security systems later confirmed the van's arrival. One camera captured it turning into the driveway of the Laundrie residence. Brian stepped out alone. He walked inside. That was it. From September 1st through September 10th, no missing persons report was filed. Gabby's family called repeatedly. Texts went unanswered. They messaged Brian directly, asking where Gabby was. No reply. On social media, her accounts remained frozen. Brian's too. The van sat parked in the driveway for several days. Then it was moved. It appeared clean on the outside. No mud, no visible debris. But the inside told a different story. On September 11th, after Gabby's family filed the missing person report, Northport Police Department dispatched officers to the Laundrie home. They requested to speak with Brian. The response came through a lawyer. No comment. The next day, the van was seized. Crime scene techs executed a forensic sweep of the interior. The report, later unsealed, listed a stained mattress cover in the rear, a damaged cell phone charging block, hair consistent with Gabby's profile found in the wheel well liner, trace amounts of blood beneath the sliding door weather seal, a receipt for a gas station in Wyoming, time-stamped August 30th. What raised concern wasn't just what they found, it was what was missing. Gabby's cell phone wasn't in the van. Her ID was gone. Her journal, which she regularly carried, was not recovered. But a hard drive used for video footage was found. Password protected. A digital forensic examiner at the FBI's Tampa field office imaged the drive. Initial metadata analysis showed several files deleted between August 27 and August 30. The deletions were manual, not part of an automated system purge. Partial recovery was possible, but the file names had been overwritten. The investigation then shifted to Brian's behavior upon return. He had not only refused to talk, but he also declined to explain why he'd driven 2,400 miles home without Gabby. His parents confirmed to officers that he arrived on the 1st, but gave no information beyond that. They claimed they had not seen Gabby since the couple left in early July. Officers noted that during their brief conversation, the family refused consent for property searches. At this point, Brian was still classified as a person of interest, not a suspect. There was no body, no confession, only silence, a returned vehicle, and inconsistencies growing with each unanswered question. On September 14th, the Laundrie family's attorney issued a public statement, citing the emotional toll of the situation. It didn't mention Gabby's name. That same night, Brian reportedly left the house, telling his parents he was going hiking in the nearby Carlton Reserve. He never returned. The van's forensic value was limited but meaningful. The DNA evidence was insufficient to prove harm, but combined with GPS pings, travel records, and the absence of Gabby's belongings, It reinforced what investigators already suspected. Something had happened before the drive home. Data pulled from the van's infotainment system revealed a waypoint saved near Jackson, Wyoming. A timestamp placed it late afternoon on August 27th, the same evening Gabby's phone last pinged. Investigators marked that moment in the timeline, not as a point of death, but as the beginning of a disappearance. The van was no longer just a mode of transport. It was the last enclosed space Gabby had been confirmed to occupy. And its return, empty and silent, spoke volumes. In forensic terms, it became a proxy for her absence. Every stain, every missing item, every wiped file added weight to the assumption no one wanted to say aloud. On September 18, 2021, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, in coordination with Teton County Search and Rescue, launched a ground search near the Spread Creek dispersed camping area in Wyoming. The decision wasn't speculative. It followed a triangulation of Gabby Petito's last known cell tower ping, a tip from a travel blogger's dash cam footage, and a data timestamp from her Instagram login. Search radius was confined to less than 3 square miles. The terrain, uneven, heavily wooded, no paved roads, required drone support and cadaver dogs trained for wilderness conditions. Heat mapping identified one area of interest roughly 900 feet from the van's GPS coordinate from August 27th. At 11:34 a.m. on September 19th, a volunteer searcher, working on a mapped grid, spotted what appeared to be fabric under brush cover. Park rangers marked off the area. FBI forensics was called in immediately. The body was located 320 feet north of the creek bed, partially covered with dirt and organic debris. She was not buried. A black sports bra, blue shorts, and remnants of a light sweatshirt were consistent with Gabby's earlier photos. Her left ankle showed skin slippage, a decomposition indicator. An ID was not present, but her face was still recognizable. No signs of wildlife scavenging. The location was remote. No direct trail led to the spot, and the ground showed no sign of vehicular tracks or drag marks. She had likely been carried. The area was secured under federal jurisdiction. Teton County Medical Examiner Dr. Brent Blue was on site by early afternoon. A field evaluation was performed. Body temperature had equalized. Insect activity indicated a post-mortem interval exceeding 18 days, matching the timeline from her last known contact on August 27th. The remains were transported to Jackson for full autopsy. Analysis began the following morning. Autopsy findings confirmed the cause of death. Manual strangulation. Petechial hemorrhaging was visible in the sclera of both eyes. Hyoid fracture was present, along with bruising on the anterior neck and lower jaw. These injuries were sustained during life. No defensive wounds were noted on the hands or arms. There were also 3 blunt force injuries to the skull, consistent with a fall or impact during the struggle. The distribution of livor mortis suggested she died lying on her right side. Toxicology was negative for alcohol or drugs. In forensic terms, the injuries were deliberate, not accidental. Investigators processed the surrounding scene for trace evidence. Soil samples from beneath the body tested positive for human blood and epithelial tissue. Partial shoe prints, size 10.5 men's, were located on a nearby slope. A leaf fragment with a blood smear was collected 15 feet east of the body. DNA testing later confirmed it belonged to Gabby. The forensics unit also recovered a plastic water bottle near a fire ring close to the van's last parked position. It bore Gabby's fingerprints and latent impressions of another unidentified source. A full sweep of the van's exterior was cross-referenced with trace material from the scene. Pollen and particulate samples matched to the Spread Creek Basin, further corroborating that the van had remained at the site on the day of the homicide. The area where Gabby's body was discovered offered no shelter, no easy exit, and no random foot traffic. It wasn't a place someone could stumble upon by accident. Her family was notified on the evening of September 19th. A DNA match confirmed her identity the next day. By then, public interest in the case had intensified. But within the FBI case file, the tone was exacting, clinical. The report noted this was not a disappearance, it was a concealed crime, placed outside easy detection, positioned to delay discovery, and executed in isolation. In the weeks that followed, Spread Creek was revisited several times for secondary sweeps. No murder weapon was recovered, no written note, no phone. But there was no longer ambiguity about what had happened. Gabby Petito had not walked away. She had been left behind. By the time the FBI officially classified Gabby Petito's case as a homicide, the focus of the investigation had already shifted back to Northport, Florida. Not because of new evidence, but because of someone who was no longer answering his phone, not giving a statement, and, by all indications, not even at home anymore. Brian Laundrie had vanished. According to his parents, Brian left the house on September 13, 2021, stating he intended to go for a hike at the Carlton Reserve, a 25,000-acre stretch of swamp and woodland terrain just minutes from their home. They said they hadn't seen or heard from him since. The announcement came to law enforcement on September 17th, 4 days after his departure. The delay raised immediate questions inside the case team. The FBI reviewed nearby traffic cameras and neighborhood surveillance from the 13th. Brian's vehicle, a silver Ford Mustang, was seen entering the reserve's perimeter parking area at approximately 11:07 a.m. The car was later retrieved by his parents on September 15th. They did not report him missing at that time. No phone, no wallet, no digital trail. The Carlton Reserve search began under constrained conditions. The terrain was marshy, densely overgrown, and frequently flooded. The local sheriff's office coordinated with federal agents, K-9 teams, drones, and divers trained in search and recovery. But the operation was hampered by poor visibility, deep water pockets, and the risk of environmental contamination. By day 3, forward search teams flagged one concern: the absence of scent. Trained cadaver dogs did not pick up human decomposition during initial passes. No personal belongings were located. The search area was widened, but the problem persisted. Federal agents reviewed Brian's phone records, hoping for pings or recent logins, but the device had been powered off or destroyed. Location data ended on September 10th. Access logs to his social media, bank, and email showed no activity after that date either. No signs of planning, no signal of escape. FBI profiler notes reflected an emerging hypothesis. If Brian had entered the swamp alone, with no communication gear and no survival equipment, it likely wasn't for recreation. On September 23rd, a federal arrest warrant was issued, not for homicide, but for unauthorized use of Gabby's debit card. It was a technical charge based on his withdrawal of $1,000 between August 30th and September 1st, after Gabby had likely already been killed. The charge allowed authorities to issue an interstate wanted notice while building the larger case. But by this point, Brian had already been gone for 10 days. Public attention intensified. Protesters gathered outside the Laundrie home daily. National news networks covered the case nonstop. Tips flooded in, sightings in North Carolina, Alabama, even Mexico. All were investigated. None confirmed. By early October, the Carlton Reserve had been searched multiple times, with no result. The environment itself became the obstacle. Swamps in that region can hold human remains indefinitely without surfacing. Feral pigs and alligators inhabit much of the interior. Rainfall had risen sharply in the weeks after Brian's disappearance, submerging most of the trails and campsites. Then the water began to recede. On October 20th, 2021, a dry section of the reserve reopened for ground search. Within an hour of arrival, a team from the FBI, accompanied by Brian's parents and a law enforcement liaison, located personal items, a dry bag, a notebook, and a partial human skull, approximately 2 miles from the reserve's entrance. The remains were skeletal. A backpack was nearby, damaged but intact. The scene showed signs of prolonged exposure to water and environmental decay. No sign of clothing remained, but dental records matched the remains to Brian Laundrie. The notebook was recovered in waterlogged condition. It required freeze-drying and careful extraction to preserve the ink. Inside were several pages, some illegible, but one entry, undamaged, outlined a statement accepting responsibility for Gabby's death. The wording was informal, self-justifying, and focused on her being injured and in pain. Forensic linguists verified it as consistent with Brian's prior written patterns. The death was ruled a suicide by gunshot wound to the head. A revolver was located buried in sediment nearby. It had been underwater for weeks, but matched shell casings recovered at the scene. The FBI closed its case officially on January 21st, 2022. The final summary stated Brian Laundrie acted alone in the death of Gabby Petito. All physical and digital evidence supported that conclusion. No charges were filed against his parents. For investigators, Brian's disappearance didn't delay justice. It altered its form. The data trail had ended. The interviews were over. There would be no trial, no cross-examination, no sworn testimony. But the evidence stood. The swamp didn't hide the truth forever. It only delayed the moment someone was ready to see it. By January 21st, 2022, the investigation into the death of Gabby Petito had formally concluded. The Federal Bureau of Investigation issued a final statement. All logical investigative steps have been concluded. The investigation has identified the person responsible for the tragic death of Gabby Petito as Brian Laundrie. But within that conclusion lay a series of facts, each supported not by speculation, but by verified forensic evidence, digital records, and site analysis. In a case that began with a missing persons report and ended in 2 confirmed deaths, the investigative narrative was not shaped by confession. It was constructed by sequence, by consistency, and by contradiction. The notebook recovered near Brian Laundrie's remains contained a handwritten admission. The ink had held despite water exposure. On one page, Brian wrote that Gabby had fallen and was in pain, and that he ended her suffering. The statement lacked date, detail, or context. It was self-contained, emotionally flat, and offered no clarity beyond its core claim of responsibility. Medical examiners did not support that version. Gabby's autopsy report, released by the Teton County coroner, indicated death by manual strangulation, petechial hemorrhages, hyoid bone fracture, deep tissue bruising. None of it supported a mercy-killing narrative. There were no defensive wounds, suggesting she may not have been able to resist, and she had not sustained prior injuries that would indicate a fall or debilitating trauma. Forensic pathologists confirmed her injuries required sustained force. Death was intentional, not spontaneous. It took time, and it was personal. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit reviewed the notebook text in full, cross-referencing it with known patterns from previous writings by Brian, obtained from devices and messages. Analysts noted deflection of blame, inconsistent sentence structure, and language intended to recast motive. It read less like a confession and more like a justification. No apology was recorded. From the beginning, the case had relied on physical evidence. There was no eyewitness to the crime, no confession at the scene, but every forensic component aligned without contradiction. Cell tower data placed Gabby's phone in the Spread Creek area until 6:12 p.m. on August 27th. Financial records showed her debit card was used after that point by Brian. Video evidence confirmed the van's presence near the site on the same date. Autopsy findings placed her time of death within a 3 to 4 day window before September 1st. Brian's return to Florida on that day alone completed the timeline. There were no gaps, no alternate possibilities supported by physical facts. With the recovery of Brian's remains in the notebook, no further prosecution could be pursued. The federal arrest warrant for debit card fraud was withdrawn. No homicide charges were filed posthumously. The case was closed administratively, not because justice had been fully delivered, but because the person responsible was no longer alive. In that sense, closure came not through court proceedings, but through incontrovertible sequencing. Gabby was dead, Brian confessed in writing. The evidence confirmed it. The consequences of the case extended far beyond a single investigation. Public scrutiny of the Moab police stop on August 12th led to formal review by the Utah Department of Public Safety. Policy changes were enacted to improve officer training on identifying primary aggressors in domestic disputes. Body cam footage alone, the department admitted, had not been enough. In New York, Gabby's parents established the Gabby Petito Foundation, focused on helping families of missing persons and survivors of domestic violence. The foundation works closely with law enforcement and media to ensure faster mobilization during early hours of disappearance, what they now call the prevention window. Several states, including Utah and Florida, adopted additional training standards for domestic violence intervention for first responders, partially in response to the public impact of Gabby's case. What Gabby experienced in her final weeks left behind not only tragedy, but a documented case study of how violence in intimate relationships can escalate undetected in open spaces, on public platforms, and even under official supervision. She had been visible, socially, digitally, and emotionally, and yet no one stopped it. Her case highlighted the gaps in how society distinguishes between healthy relationships and controlled ones, between sadness and danger, between silence and threat. The images she posted were real, so were the signs beneath them. The investigation into her death did more than identify a perpetrator. It outlined a failure of response, a trail of unaddressed warning signs, and a need for collective awareness. In towns, parks, and homes across the country, people began to reevaluate what abuse looks like when it isn't loud. For the FBI, the Petito case reinforced the value of integrated evidence collection, social media monitoring, digital forensics, geolocation data, and behavioral analysis. The investigation demonstrated how disparate sources, when assembled precisely, can tell a complete story without a single spoken word. Gabby's remains were returned to her family in September 2021. Her funeral was held privately in New York. In that service, her father said, "She touched the world. He wasn't wrong. But what she also did, even in death, was force institutions to listen." Looking back on this story, I'm reminded how fast things can unravel when silence replaces honesty and fear takes the place of love. If you're in a relationship that feels off, trust your gut. Don't wait for things to make sense. Sometimes protecting yourself means leaving before there's proof. We can't undo what happened to Gabby, but we can make sure her story helps someone else spot the signs, speak up, or walk away. What do you think we can do better as a society to protect victims before it's too late? Do you believe law enforcement missed a chance in Moab? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. If this video moved you or made you reflect, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story that just might save a life.